Hi everyone, we are here live from our library with Scholastic Parents, and today is Multicultural Children's Book Day. So we wanted to share with you some diverse reads, and as we go through this, if you have any questions or things like that, we're going to take them from you. Just put them in the comment section, and we'll try to get through them as soon as possible. So I wanted to start out with a book that I love from my childhood. This is Judy Blume, Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. And I thought I would start out with this one because when I grew up, I was raised Islamic, and I really identified with this book because the main character is trying to figure out her family. One side is Jewish, one side is Christian, and she's trying to figure out where she fits in. And so she explores both sides. And so this really resonated for me. And of course, Judy Blume's a fabulous writer. So I wanted to start out with something I loved that you might recognize. We're going to go through them now in age order. So I'm going to start off with books that are for the pre-K, kind of 0 to 4 age range. So the first one that I have here is Everywhere Babies by Susan Myers, illustrated by Marla Frazee. And this book is, a nice one just to see all of the different types of babies that are introduced to different families, different babies and different types of families in this story. This is a picture book. And then I have this one, Hush. This is a Caldecott honor. And this book is by Bai Song Ho. I think I'm getting that. If I mispronounce it, I apologize. And the pictures are by Holly Mead. This one, the author of the story is Thai, and the illustrator of the story, I believe, is Malaysian. And so this is a kind of traditional fairy tale or lullaby that is told to children. And I wanted to put that one out there. Something for now this one, I've got the picture of the book. It's Sweetest Kulu. I haven't had a chance to read this one, but I just got back from the American Library Association convention, and I went to a workshop where this book was heavily recommended by one of my librarian friends, Angie Manfredi. And I went and looked up, I have a cheat sheet here. I pulled the review from Kirkus. So I'm just gonna read you the first sentence and the last sentence. And it says, a newborn child is welcomed by the sun, the wind, the Arctic land, and all its animal inhabitants, who brings gifts of love and self-respect. Kulu is an Inuktitut term of endearment, but this appreciation for the baby and the baby's world would make a lovely gift for any new parent. So, Sweetest Kulu. Block that, right? Beautiful story there. This one, Yo Yes by Chris Roshka. Right? You've got two kids that run into each other, and they're kind of like debating if they can have a friendship. And this just has, beautiful illustrations. And if, somebody is working on like sight word recognition, this is just kind of like a perfect book to start with, because you've got, very straight and to the point, simple, words and stuff like that. And you can read it with them, interpretations. That one also has a medal on it. This is also got the Caldecott honor, which is something that the American Library Association gives for books that have illustrations that kind of help to drive the story. The next one that I've got here is the family book. This is by Todd Parr. And I pulled this one because it has all different types of families. As you can see, it starts out, some big families are big, some families are small. And it has, a mixture of families that are represented by different animals and different people and stuff like that. And, all different types of colors. And we even got some aliens in there. So, multicultural, not in just people from different cultures, but animals from different cultures and people from different planets and stuff like that. So I thought that would be fun. All right. So as I move up in the age groups, right, the next ones that I have here on my list are for the kind of kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade, and kids that are kind of between the ages of 5 and 7. And from here on, I really tried to focus on stories that weren't just about people that were from different cultures, but also the interplay between people from different cultures. So sometimes it could be the illustrator and the author, in the case of The Last Stop on Market Street. And if you look at this one, this has 3 medals on the cover. Not that medals are always, the way to pick a favorite, but it got the Caldecott honor, It got the Newbery Medal, which last year was for the best contribution to children's literature, and the Coretta Scott King Medal. And it's written by Matt de la Pena, and the pictures are by Christian Robinson. So this book is, you know, very well regarded at this point. As you can see, the book is set on a bus, and so the main character is traveling with his grandmother on the bus, and they have interactions with all the different types of people that are in San Francisco. So this is a beautiful book. The next one that I've got here for you is Two Friends. Now, if you've been watching the Facebook Live series on Scholastic Parents, you may have seen Selena Alco and Sean Qualls interviewed, and this is the story of Frederick Douglass and Susan B. Anthony, and it's kind of an imagined conversation between the two of them. So I like this one because, you know, it's got the two different cultures and two different movements happening at this, you know, near around the same time, and what those two people talk about in conversation with each other. And now this one, Under the Same Sun. This is by Sharon Robinson, whose father is Jackie Robinson, and illustrated by A.G. Ford. And this story is about an African-American family that travels back to, I believe, Tanzania, which is where they're from, you know, or they have some of their families from. So, you know, it's the two similar cultures, but, you know, African-Americans and Africans, you know, have a lot of things to learn from each other as well as to share with each other, and they get the opportunity to see at the end of the book one of the kind of castles or fortresses on the coast where some of their ancestors, you know, may have traveled through when they were slaves and being put onto the slave ships. So it's just kind of, there's a lot that's going on in this book, and it's beautifully illustrated. And then I've got, okay, so then I'm going to check and see if we have any questions. Yeah, all right, let's put some questions in there so we can see what you got. All right, the next one, this I'm going into the 8 to 10 age group, which is about grades 3, 4, 5. And so the first one that I pulled up for that is Coming to America, The Story of Immigration by Betsy Maestro and illustrated by Susanna Ryan. And, you know, this story is going to resonate for a lot of different Americans. I myself have a grandmother and a grandfather from Barbuda who both came through Ellis Island. And I had the opportunity to go there and see their names on the wall. You do a little rubbing, and you can actually, you know, librarian, if you go into the archive at Ellis Island, you can look up with the names and you can see the manifest for the ship that somebody came on and actually see their name and age and stuff like that when they came. So this one, fabulous book. And then I've got this one here, Echo by Pam Enos Ryan. This title won the Newbery Honor last year, so it was in the same categories Last Up on Market Street. And it may seem, you know, like a thick book, but if you're an avid reader, if you have a child who's an avid reader like I was, this will not be too challenging. The book is beautifully put together. It's just kind of a gorgeous, very appealing story. And it's got a frame story here in the beginning where a character finds a harmonica, or, you know, it kind of starts with like a mystical fairy tale like quality to it. And then inside of the book you get 3 different stories, 3 different cultures. One is set in Germany, one is here in the United States with children who are being adopted, and then another one is set on a kind of like a farm with an interplay between a Mexican-American girl and a family that's, you know, Japanese-American, they've been taken away from their farm, and her family comes in to kind of, you know, run the farm for them while they're in the internment camps. The harmonica, which you see here on the spine, weaves its way all the way through the stories. So this is a fabulous book. We read it in our employee book club and loved it. And another one that we read in the employee book club by Christopher Paul Curtis, The Madman of Piney Woods. This is the second book in a trilogy that he has, which is about Buxton, a place in Canada that slaves that were escaping on the Underground Railroad made their way to. It's a town, you know, a lot of times we hear the story of the Underground Railroad and people headed north, but then it just kind of ends when they get to Canada. Christopher Paul Curtis is actually from Canada, so in his first book in this series, he tells us the story of Elijah, who's the first child to be born free in that town. This takes place several years later, so it's kind of, you don't have to have read the first one, but it does help. And he's got 2 main characters, and so you've got this one here, and this young man here is Irish American. So you get this story about the Irish Americans and the coffin ships that some of them had to stay on for months, into years, trying to get into Canada. So if you think about immigration and the story of what it was like for people to immigrate into Canada, coffin ships is something that I'd never heard of. And then when I read this book and we talked about it in book club, we started kind of Googling to learn more about it. And it goes back and forth in narration between the two characters. And it's very funny. It's not just, historical fiction that gives you information, but also will make you laugh out loud. All right. So then the next age group that I've got is kind of moving into middle school. 6th, 7th, 8th grade, which would be about 11 to 13 years old. Now, this book, The Shadow Hero, I am embarrassed to say that I didn't read till recently. I knew about it for a while, but in preparation for this, I started to read it. Now, I love this one by Jean Luen Liang, American-born Chinese. It won the Prince Medal and National Book Award honor a while ago. And in this story, Jean Luen Yang, he takes a character that was not popular, but was the first Asian American comic book character in the 40s, like the golden age of comics. And that character didn't have a backstory. So he kind of wrote a origin story for this character and sets him, here in America. He's kind of a reluctant hero. His mother sees that there are all these superheroes flying around, and she wants her son to be special and aspire for something huge. And so she makes him a costume and tries to put him through all of these different things, like a toxic spill, like different things. Try to get bit by an animal that's been experimented on in a lab, because she's trying to get him superpowers. And eventually he ends up training in martial arts, and he basically, he gets a little bit of superpowers from a spirit that's a turtle spirit. You see that he has this. Now, what's great about this story is, one, the mother character is hilarious, which she keeps on trying to put her son through to try to get him to superhero status. She's like the comedic relief for sure. And then two, in the back of the book, they actually have the first issue of the original comic. So Jean Luen Yang kind of tells you the story and then goes back and, after introducing it and explaining it, he gives you the original first issue of the comic that he is trying to kind of rewrite. All right. So now I've got books for high school. Maybe should I take questions out? Take a look and see. No questions out? Oh, no. All right. We'll wait in the end. So I've got books for high school age 14 to 17, which is like 9th through 12th grade. The first one that I've got here is If I Ever Get Out of Here. This is by Eric Gansworth. I believe that this one got an American Indian Youth Literature Award. And what I love about this book is that the main character, he's Tuscarora, he's a 7th grader. He's in gifted and talented classes, and so he's surrounded by a lot of children who are not like him. And when he interacts with them and talks to them, sometimes he'll have an internal dialogue where this is what he's thinking and this is why, he has a reaction to something like he does. But then when he says out loud, it's kind of filtered or different. So it kind of gives you a real insight into the motivation behind his thoughts. He gives you historical context behind why he feels the way he does about the way he's being interacted with or spoken to by teachers, by students, by the school bully. And then you get, what he says out loud. And so this book is really fabulous, and I look forward to anything else Eric Gansworth is working on. All right, so then I have The Savage Fortress by Sarwat Chadha. Right? And I haven't read this one yet, so I have on my cheat sheet, I thought I'd give you the first and the last line from the review. So it says, this fantasy, this is from Kirkus, riffs on events from the Ramayana, the takeoff point for a knockdown, drag-out adventure that draws a 13-year-old into the unfinished business of the Indian gods. And then the last sentence says, non-stop action and likable teen characters will attract fans of fantasy quests such as Percy Jackson books and the saga of Nicholas Flamel. So this is the first one, and then the second one is called The City of Death. So that would be an exciting series to pull out. It's based on kind of a different mythology. A lot of times, especially Percy Jackson, we hear stuff that's based on Greek mythology, Roman mythology, and actually Percy Jackson has the Chronicles, which I love, which are based on Egyptian mythology. So it's another one that's similar. All right, so I've got here for you The Lightning Queen by Laura Rousseau. This is another one that we read in our employee book club. I like to recommend the ones that we read and loved. And this I also learned something from. It's set in Mexico, and you've got the local Mixtec peoples there, and then there's a traveling band of Romani gypsies that come through, and they show movies. So they kind of move around, travel around, stop in a community, and show movies to them, and they stay there for a while. And the main character you see here, who's kind of dancing, she's the Lightning Queen, and then inside of her skirt you can see the other character who she interacts with. They have a friendship that develops over the repeated times that this group of travelers comes to the village. In addition to that, he has interaction. So there's an interaction between those two cultures, which I didn't even know that this community used to travel around, in Mexico and interact there. So that for me was another learning experience. And then he has, with his friends, interactions with the teacher at school. And if you've ever read anything about natives that have been put into boarding schools, then he goes home each night, but you kind of get a window into what that experience is like, where people are encouraged to only speak English, and the teacher herself has a journey where she learns more and kind of learns stuff and becomes somebody who is a member of the community, as opposed to somebody who's just an outsider who comes in and interacts with kids. So this book, excellent. So all right, and then I've got. All right, so moving on, I think we've got those. All right, so here we've got AllAmerican Boys. Right. This is by Jason Reynolds and Brendan Kelly. Now, I can't say enough about this book. This was, especially in the climate, everything that's going on the past few years, with interactions between young African Americans and the men in particular, and the police. You've got a character here who the police officer thinks that he's stealing something from the store. He wasn't. And the police officer ends up attacking him. And the witness is somebody who goes to school with him, but he's not friends with him directly. He's friends with some of his friends, so he knows who he is. And the narration goes back and forth between these two characters. One as he's kind of, grappling with how he feels. Everybody's kind of starting to create kind of a movement. There's a hashtag in the local school community, things that they're putting up on the walls and graffiti. And, I forget his name, but I think it's something like Rashad is absent today, or Rashad is absent again today, all the times he's in the hospital. Forgive me if I got his name wrong. I read it last year. And then Brendan Kelly, the other author, he tells a perspective of the character who witnessed it, who's wondering, how much it is his responsibility to, speak up and tell what he saw from his perspective. So this won the Coretta Scott King Medal last year, or Coretta Scott King Honor, and I got to see them both speak at ALA. It was beautiful, and they brought the crowd to a standing ovation. So it's a fabulous book. And then this one, Like No Other. Now I know what you're gonna say. You're gonna be like, Demosa, you're just promoting this because you know Una LaMarche and you guys went to high school together and used to run track at the same time. But this book has 4 stars on Goodreads and incredibly positive reviews. It's selling well to other books. So this book stands on its own, despite the fact that I know and love the author. And the main characters here are African American male and a Hasidic Jewish girl who fall in love with each other. Very improbable, right? But there is a storm. It could be Sandy or it could be Irene, where the power goes out in an elevator, and they end up in the dark. And just kind of having a conversation that wouldn't have happened under any other circumstances. And he's kind of a quiet, nerdy kid, and she's not really supposed to speak to someone, certainly not him, outside the community. And then they just kind of start to have these interactions with each other, and they fall for each other. Now, I'm not going to tell you how it ends, but this, it also goes back and forth between their different perspectives, and you learn a lot about the way that two communities can be living, side by side in a place like Brooklyn, Crown Heights, and have kind of ideas of what each community is like, but then learn about each other. Learn the truth behind the stereotypes. So. I've got this one. Does my head look big in this? Now I had to print out the cover for this one, and I had printed out the other one because we didn't have it here. This one we do have. This is our book, but we're doing this huge construction project in the archive, and it's impossible for me to get to it on the shelf. And here you have an Australian teenager who decides that she's going to start wearing the hijab or headscarf to school. And so the interaction that she has, as people in the community are reacting to this, decision that she's made is kind of like, as the school community goes through it, they all learn, different things about the assumptions that you make and fears that are maybe unfounded. That's, by Rhonda Abdel Fattah. And still in the high school, this is the last one that I've got for high school. The Porcupine of Truth by Bill Konigsberg. And this story is one that I love. It won the Stonewall Award last year, which is, it's like the Mike and Larry Romans Award for Children's Literature. It won in the teen category. The main character in this story is a white male who moves to a new town and immediately meets and runs into an African-American female. She is a lesbian and she's been thrown out of her house because her parents are super religious. So he immediately feels, like he wants to take her in. He's kind of got to, like he's going to help her, just kind of come to her aid immediately. And he has a lot of assumptions about her. He also kind of has a crush on her. And one of the things I love about this book is the way that she constantly checks his assumptions. He'll say something that is, without thinking, or he doesn't know, and then she will correct him. And so I really appreciated the voice that Bill Konigsberg gave to her in the book and the story that he gave her. As you go further in the book, he learns some things about his own grandfather. And what I'll tell you now, but don't tell everybody because you don't give away the ending, is that the AIDS quilt shows up in this book, and I'm a quilter, so I didn't even know that the AIDS quilt was going to be in the story, and then it was, and I was so excited. It's like, oh my God, a book with a quilt. So that'll be a future, live from our library, quilting books. Everyone tune in. All right, so now I've got books. These are some of our YA books. But I have them as ones adults might be interested, but also teens might like them. Now this one, Beyond Magenta, Transgender Teens Speak Out. It's got a Stonewall honor as well. Now, I've only read one story out of this book. It's the story of Christina. I read it because I had the opportunity to meet Christina at the Bank Street Book Festival, where she presented with Susan Kuklin, who's the person who writes this and does the photographs. And one of the things I like about the way that she put it together is that you have Christina's story about transitioning, and then you also have the mother's story where she's explaining, how she felt as she was going through this experience with her child, and the other children in the family and stuff like that, and the friends and stuff like that. And it was just, it's just like a really powerful experience. And just like getting a window into what people's feelings are like as they're, going through this kind of thing in their life. So Beyond Magenta, I recommend. Beautiful book. All right. Then I've got Becoming Maria. This is written by Sonia Manzano, who you may remember as Maria from Sesame Street. She reads the audiobook for this, which I think that I may have mentioned previous when we were doing read alouds. Maybe it's a different book of hers, The Revolution of Evelyn Serrano, that I might have mentioned. But she's growing up in the Bronx, but then she comes into where I really identify. She goes to a school in Manhattan. It is LaGuardia, the performing arts school you may remember from Fame. I want to live forever. And so she went to that high school, and if you think about that TV show, you can imagine what it was like for her there. She kind of experienced culture shock going from living in the Bronx to every day traveling into the city, and being around kids that had all kind of different artistic interests and were from all around the city. And I had that same experience. I live in the outer suburbs, Queens, or grew up, and I traveled into Manhattan every day, and same thing, culture shock coming from Rockaway and going to the Upper East Side every day. And then the last one that I have here, I think, this is Nazi Hunters, How a Team of Spies and Survivors Captured the World's Most Notorious Nazi by Neil Bascom. Now, there is an adult version of this book. This is the Young Readers Edition. And this is just an incredibly powerful book. True story of how they went to Argentina and tracked down one of the people who was instrumental in, putting people to death in concentration camps. Now, this book, I mean, it's not to laugh at, but I found myself crying on the subway, and I was, sitting there reading the book, and the scene in particular that got me, there were a few, but this one was where one of the spies was talking to her mother on her deathbed. Now, they're not supposed to tell anyone what they did, so even after the guy came to justice, and was put on trial and stuff, the people who had been instrumental in getting him out of Argentina weren't supposed to tell anybody they had did this. So they, they knew internally they had done this, but they, and a lot of the story set in Argentina, you get to see the interplay between, them and the Argentinian culture, spies that are trying to fit in and not be noticed and stuff like that. There's a lot of pictures of, spy equipment from back in the day. And so anyway, he's on his mother's deathbed. He whispers into her ear and lets her know that he was part of this operation. And, they had family that died in the camps. And so that was just such a powerful moment, to just like whisper to somebody, you're not supposed to tell. And I found myself crying, as I was reading the book, and then I remember looking up on the train, trying to blink away the tears, and I making direct eye contact with this woman who was sitting across from me, and she was like looking at me like, "Are you okay?" And I was, in a good way. All right, so now we're gonna see if we have some questions from folks. So I'm not ignoring you, I'm just looking at. All right. So let's see, we're gonna, first of all of this that is on the site is on the scholastic.com /parents page. So you can go there. We're gonna have a list of all these books with the authors and links and stuff like that. And I'll go back through it if anybody needs, a particular type you need to know. Multiculturalchildrensbookday.com is the website if you're looking for other resources about today in multicultural children's literature. All right, so somebody asked, are there any books about diversity that specifically deal with disabilities in various forms that would be especially good for younger readers? And so until I got to younger readers, my first thought was Memory of Light by Francisco Stork. Books about diversity, especially disabilities, various forms would be especially good for younger readers. I mean, the first one that comes to mind, I think I've recommended before, is My Brother Charlie, which is the story of a young man who has autism. It's by Holly Robinson Peete, and I think I had mentioned also Same But Different, which is older audience, kind of like high school audience or middle grade to high school audience, and she wrote that one with her son and her daughter. And Same But Different, so Same But Different is the older one, and then My Brother Charlie is a picture book, and she did that one with the sister. So both of her children have put these books together for her, along with her. I keep on thinking of YA titles. Another one that comes to mind is Pinned by Sharon Flake, where there's a African American girl who's she doesn't quite have a learning disability, but she has a lot of trouble reading. One of the things I love there is that her family chooses to read together each night, and she has a crush on a young Hispanic man who is in a wheelchair, and he's like really smart, so it kind of flips expectations and stuff like that. She's an athlete and he's the super smart one, and she's interested in him, and he's like, this girl. And I will have to do some research and see if I can come up with younger titles that have that. If anybody has any suggestions of books for younger readers, and something may come to me as I am sitting here. Let's see what else we've got. How often do you do these live events? We've been doing them monthly. We try to put it up on the Scholastic Parents Facebook page and stuff like that about a week or so in advance, so that you can click on the event and put it into your calendar. And next month, I believe the date is the 21st of February, and we're going to be talking about books for Black History Month. So it was fabulous connecting with you guys. Which one? Oh yeah, well, let's go real quick, maybe through some of these different ones. We'll go back to the beginning. All right, so some of the books, if you're just tuning in, right, we had Everywhere Babies, Hush. And I think that when I went through this, I may have incorrectly said that the illustrator was Malaysian. That was the illustrator of Shadow Hero. The Holly Mead is the illustrator on this one. Yo Yes. The Family Book. Last Stop on Market Street. Two friends under the same sun, coming to America. This one was one of the first ones we did, Sweetest Kulu. It's a picture of the heaven. Echo. The Madman of Piney Woods. The Shadow Hero. And then with that one, this is the first Jean Luen Yang, who I should mention was the National Ambassador for Children's Literature last year. If I ever get out of here. The Savage Fortress and City of Death. The Lightning Queen. AllAmerican Boys and Like No Other. The Porcupine of Truth. Beyond Magenta. And then Becoming Maria and Nazi Hunters. Let's see if we have any final questions before we. All right, which is my favorite and why? Oh man, that is a tough question. My favorite of all of these. Porcupine of Truth. When I saw this got the Stonewall Award, I had tears in my eyes because it was a sleeper hit, and we were talking about it in book club and all around the building and stuff. I wasn't sure, but a committee found this book that I loved and they gave it an award, brought a little more attention to it. So that is, I guess, of the teen ones, this is my personal favorite. And then if I was going to, for younger readers, of course, I love Last Up on Market Street. But let's see what we got here. Favorite. I'm probably gonna pull Two Friends. All right. For me, with this one, which is also, I did mention this, so I should show it, right? The reason that these two, I love them, is the artwork. The stories as well, but I just really find the artwork very refreshing. And it almost has like a collage-like quality to it. Definitely, like the use of paint and stuff like this. I would love to, put these illustrations up and then give children an opportunity to try to paint, in their styles and paint their own stories. So these are the two I have for the younger age that are favorites of mine. All right. Thank you everyone for watching us. I look forward to seeing you on February 21st when we're going to go over stories for African American History Month. Like I said before, remember to go to scholastic.com/parents for more information. We're going to put up a list of all of these books with links and stuff like that. And if you have any other questions, we're going to go through the comments section on Facebook and make sure we can answer them for you. And multiculturalchildrensbookday.com to get more resources.